or the EDL. Again, this is from a protest in Afghanistan against the stoning of 19-year-old Rokhshana. Everywhere, from Iran to Afghanistan to Algeria, there are women and men who break taboos and change narratives and stand against religion's encroachment in people's lives and against Islamism. Charlie Hebdo is another good example. 145 writers opposed Penn's award to Charlie because they said it was valorizing offensive material that intensified anti-Islamic, anti-Maghreb, anti-Arab sentiments that are prevalent in the Western world. But as Salman Rushdie said, the Charlie Hebdo artists were executed in cold blood for drawing cartoons, which is an entirely legitimate activity. It is quite right that Penn should honor their sacrifice and condemn their murder. This issue, he says, has nothing to do with an oppressed and disadvantaged minority. It has everything to do with the battle against fanatical Islam, which is highly organized, well-funded, and which seeks to terrify us all, Muslims as well as non-Muslims, into cowed silence. And a lot of people, including Muslims, agree. Mustafa Urad, he's a native Algerian and copy editor for Charlie, who was killed in the attack. A French Muslim cafe owner was threatened for putting Je suis Charlie sign in his East London coffee shop. In Turkey, 2 columnists from a daily are facing an investigation for religious defamation after featuring the Charlie cover. And cartoonists across the Arab world, from Egypt to Lebanon to Qatar and to Jordan, took a stand with Charlie against the Islamists. Even in Iran, which is a theocracy, where blasphemy, apostasy, enmity against God, heresy, and 130 offenses are punishable by death, you have someone like Nasrin Sotoudeh, who's a human rights lawyer, showing her solidarity with Charlie. Whilst journalists who tried to rally in support of Charlie were attacked and prevented from protesting by security agents wielding clubs and chains. An Iranian newspaper was shut down for publishing a photo showing Charlie, solidarity with Charlie. So clearly, not all Muslims are offended, and even those who are do not go on to kill for it. In Bangladesh too, there are Islamists killing and threatening beloved atheist bloggers like Abhijit Roy, but there is also a deeply secular movement against them, including 24 villages that have become known as Jama'at-free villages or Islamist-free villages. Religion is not the only marker for our societies, nor is it the most important. I, for one, only read the Quran after I became an ex-Muslim and an atheist. I was born into it, just as nearly everyone is, depending on where they're born. It's geography and your parents' religion that mostly determine yours. In Iran, I didn't have to veil. I went to a mixed school. I wasn't treated differently because I was a girl. I hadn't heard the terms taqiyya or jihad, and religion only became relevant in my life when it came to power in Iran. Then the veil became an issue. Then Hezbollah types were sent to my school to separate the girls from the boys, though we ran circles around them. Then my school and others were closed down in order to Islamicize them, and then came the executions and the slaughter of an entire generation by what has become known in many places. Like the relation of Islam, Islamism, and Muslims has been the position of successive British governments, whereby multiculturalism and multi-faithism has been promoted as social policies to defend religion's role in the public space, impose religious identity as the only marker to define citizens, and hand over large segments of citizens to be managed and controlled by regressive Islamist organizations and parasitical imams. This has been part of the neocon project for the extreme right-wing restructuring of society. There are no more citizens, but segregated communities with their own faith schools, their own faith-based services, and even their own faith-based courts, separate and unequal. The far right too, can I give you my bag, please? Sorry. Thank you. The far right too, which claims to despise multiculturalism, benefits from this idea of difference in order to scapegoat the other and to promote its own form of wild white identity politics. Ironically, left groups, and I say that as someone who is on the left, which are traditionally anti-state, reiterate the government's multiculturalism, multi-faithism, and identity politics, as well as the far-right narrative, and side with our oppressors by placing individuals into homogenized, restricted boxes, denying diversity and dissent, and equating all Muslims with Islamists, albeit in different ways. Rather than siding with the vast secular and progressive movements in the so-called Muslim communities and the so-called Islamic world, this section of the left, the regressive left, they side with and push the Islamist narrative that denies universalism, sees rights and equality as Western, sees secularism as Western, and justifies the suppression of women, apostates, and blasphemers under the guise of respect for other cultures, imposing on innumerable people the most reactionary elements of culture and religion, which is that of the religious right wing. In the world of these apologists, the oppressor is the victim, the oppressed incite hatred, and of course any criticism is bigotry. Of course, where the Islamists are in power, there are no such niceties about concern for minorities and safe spaces. Dissenters are prosecuted for blasphemy, apostasy, enmity against God, full stop. People like Raif Badawi, sentenced to 10 years in prison and 1,000 lashes in Saudi Arabia for raising the question of religion and politics. People like Shahrukh Zamani, found dead in prison cell recently after being sentenced to 11 years in prison for labor organizing in Iran, where the right to strike is deemed to be haram or religiously forbidden. Women's rights campaigner Suad al-Shamari, who's imprisoned on accusations of insulting Islam and the Prophet in Saudi Arabia, merely because she demanded an end to male guardianship rules. Or what about poet Fatima Naoud? She's on trial in Egypt for insulting Islam because she criticized Islamic animal slaughter. Or what about 47-year-old Roya Nobacht, sentenced initially to 20 years in prison in Iran when she went back to visit her family for insulting Islam, only because on Facebook she said that the Iranian regime is a little too Islamic. Saying Charlie Hebdo cartoonists had it coming is like saying that Shahrukh Zamani deserves to die, or that Raif Badawi deserves his lashes for being inflammatory and offending Islam or the Islamists in power. Here, of course, rather than accusations of blasphemy or apostasy, critics face charges of Islamophobia and offense. What's packaged as the culture of offense is really Islamism's imposition of blasphemy laws under the pretext of respect for Muslim sensibilities. As I've said before, this is very much the government's line as well. In September, the police removed artwork by Mimsy from London's mall galleries now because they said it had potentially inflammatory content. And this is it. Basically, it shows mice lurking in the background, featuring children's toy, Sylvanian families, after the police raised serious concerns on the potentially inflammatory content. I'm going to show you 3 more of this inflammatory content. Try and avert your eyes if you cannot tolerate this sort of inflammatory content. And it's actually just a very good example of how Islamists prowl on the innocent, on civilians, while they're eating, while they're at the beach, while they're at school. The culture of offense, in my opinion, is a smokescreen. It serves to legitimize Islamist terror and blame the victims. And this is the point. Being a woman, being gay, being unveiled, being improperly veiled, being an atheist, going to school, driving a car, having sex, falling in love, laughing out loud, all of these things offend the Islamists. Calling for civility, censorship, safe spaces, silence, or respect for the offended is merely heeding the Islamist demand for submission at the expense of dissenters. But as Rosa Luxemburg has said, freedom is always the freedom of dissenters. Charges of offense and Islamophobia aim not to prevent bigotry, in my opinion. You cannot stop bigotry by censorship, but to stop criticism and deflect legitimate outrage against Islamism, its risk aims to prevent blasphemy. And this is a great Jesus and Mo cartoon, which I'll give you a chance to read, which personifies this sort of accusations of racism. Calling it racism fails to understand that the other also has its dissenters who want to live free from religious stranglehold. Because isn't it racist to imply that all Muslims cannot tolerate criticism and free thought?
Why do you turn it off?
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Why did you do that? Why did you do
It's
that?
all right. It's all right. Do not worry. It's all right.
So I'm going to leave you again.
It's all right. It's all right. Just put it on again if you don't mind. Sorry, just 1 minute. We're just going to have that.
I'm so sorry.
Don't be sorry. This is. I actually like you to see this because nothing I say can prove what I'm talking about.
Give you a jacket,
That's okay.
mate.
You don't have to be sorry. You don't have to apologize for anyone. You don't have to apologize for anyone. Please don't do that because
It makes
my
me
parents
sad
are
that in a
Muslim.
country like
You
this,
do not
you
have
have
to
to
apologize
That's
for
nice.
anyone. It's okay. Just 1 minute. We're going to turn it on. I have to wait because I want to show you something. So I'm sorry. I've got to wait for you. This is eating up into your own question and comment time, so which I'm sure you have lots of things to say. So. Did I turn it on right? Maybe I